Since our last Salty Runback episode, a lot of new information has come up about the Polestar situation and what is going on with their staff, their players, and their current status in the NACL. And we didn't want to, put it into our next episode per se, so that'll still be coming out tomorrow. But we decided to sit down and run you through exactly what has happened over the last couple of days involving Polestar and what could potentially be the
Yeah.
next steps here for that story. So I guess let's fully take a step back, Hawk, to when this announcement first came out.
Yeah.
It was about a week ago. We were barely able to talk about it in our first or in our last Salty Run Back episode, I guess a week ago. But we decided to wait for there to be more information. But long story short, it seems like Polestar received information that some of their sponsors were pulling out and that they couldn't fund the salaries of any of their players, and that they had allowed all of their players and staff to explore other options moving forward.
Yeah. As you kind of mentioned, Grapes, we didn't want to muck up what's supposed to be a celebration of tier 3 with all this shit. And fair warning, there's just a lot of shit coming in this special episode. And as you say, it starts right here where Polestar, completely out of the blue, announced that their money has run out and that they're going to their credit, honor the contracts up to this point for all of the players, but they are effectively, kind of letting everyone go and explore options. Really important context immediately to this announcement is that Polestar received this information before, it was either the day of or the day before the OQ sign up deadline. We'll kind of talk about why that's important as we go through the process of things, but that's very important is that the moment this information was received by Polestar's ownership and management, they theoretically, all of the players could have been eligible to sign up for OQs.
And the thing is, taking a look at the dates and doing some simple math, that's 8 days basically from when they first got the information to when they eventually told all of their players and staff. And so basically they're pulling everything out, and that is kind of the world that we're living in right now, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
there was other information that came out that day that was not specifically a part of this announcement. Somebody who is close with the situation and close to some of those players at Nova came out and also delivered a couple of other notices, which is that the players still haven't gotten the pay that they were supposedly guaranteed, as well as the fact that Pulse most likely would be trying to keep the spot in the NACL, even though they wouldn't have any money to pay these players.
Right. And so immediately this Nova tweet was kind of how we realized it was going to be a more developing situation. And this was around when we recorded our part 2 last week, right? And so we kind of just very briefly commented, said it's an ongoing situation. And up to this point, Grapes and I, like literally yesterday or 2 days ago, which we'll get into soon, we didn't have enough information to really form strong stances and opinions on this. With this Nova tweet being the main conjecture that really went into everything that was going on, with just sort of basically saying, hey, it's an ongoing situation, people are involved, but what we know is that the money is gone. Fast forward now to, I believe, on Tuesday of this last week. So the day our Salty Runback episode came out, obviously we recorded the day before. In classic Salty Runback fashion, we recorded the day before big news breaks. Real ones, remember, back in the day. A Sheep Esports article comes out about the situation, and everything we are about to show you happened in the span of like 2 hours on a Tuesday from this point forward.
It was a busy night on
It
the
was a
internet to be a League of
very
Legends
busy
fan.
night.
Yeah. So let's go through this article. We're not
Yeah.
gonna read everything, but the big things that they reveal, especially at the start, is that at the time of writing, everybody has been paid except for Tenacity and Spawn.
Which
I
is
wonder
good.
if some international things have to do with that. I know Tenacity originally is from Canada. Not 100% sure there. It also is announced right here that FlyQuest was intended on announcing a full partnership with FlyQuest with Polestar and their NACL organization, but that deal fell through after the funding fell through. Obviously, this was a rumor that we had heard for quite some time beforehand as well. It's just mentioned right at the top, and then here's the bigger section as well that goes through it in further detail.
Right, exactly. And this is basically the whole article now that you've seen. The main thing to take away is one, I think the FlyQuest thing is actually really interesting because FlyQuest clearly saw this coming through their own vetting process and actually pulled out before all this shit hit the fan, which I think is really interesting. I want to give kudos to FlyQuest for doing their due diligence given the situation. And I think speaks to the fact that, to me, it was clearly evident that Polestar's financial situation was dubious at best, which is obviously why all of this happened. But I think the other main takeaway from this article is not just that, like, the finances ran out, but it's the second part of everything we're about to get into, which is just that Polestar did not seemingly handle this situation internally the best way. Let's just phrase it that way.
So before we get into like the big bombshells that get dropped here, there's a little bit of this like flavor here, which just goes. I feel like I don't know how like. I don't know if this is like the best reporting here for Sheep, but it's just talking about.
This is the best article. It also doesn't say like that much actual substance. You know what I mean?
There's some substance at the end, but this part
there,
is just kind of like over the past few months, team members thought that, oh, the Polestar staff was like whatever, this, that, and the other thing. The big stuff that happens is down here, where under this part of the article for the players, it said that the players were informed on the 28th that their verbal agreements were made months early. First of all, actually, the other thing it mentioned up there. Sorry about that. All the agreements and the contracts were never signed. It was all verbal agreements, including when the talent announcement went live and while these players were scrimming. So it seemed like they kept pushing back the date of when some of these contracts actually would be signed. Again, Pulse is going to be paying their players out until like the point where they had to make this decision, but still a very weird situation where they were not paying, where they just didn't want to sign contracts with any of the players or staff.
Right. Clearly nothing like, and this is where we're going to really get into things. Because you could give FlyQuest the benefit, FlyQuest. You could give Polestar the benefit of the doubt in that, like, they didn't know all their investors pulled out, but clearly Pulse was apprehensive about some aspect of their financials that FlyQuest also saw that led to the situation happening. So there was some anticipation to me, very obviously here. And then I think the last thing on the article, Grapes, and then we can keep moving for time, is the LCSPA section down here. This is actually very good nugget here from Evie. The official Riot Games stance is that as long as everybody gets paid for their time up to this point, what they were promised, there is no financial wrongdoing from Pulse or no wrongdoing of any kind. And this has been confirmed by other conversations that have been had internally with other people today. I'm not really feeling like I need to speak to the details of those, but Riot's official stance on the situation is that as long as everyone gets paid what they were promised, because as we believe there is no contract minimum anymore for what to pay players, Pulse has no wrongdoing because no one needs to be paid from here on out. And also, it is not Riot's business what actually happens in regards to how teams go about managing players, which I will say, I think I take slight issue with that last part because I do think malpractice maybe should lead to forcing situations, and maybe Grapes, that's what we can get into on the other stuff that we have to look at.
There's a difference between being like having the LA minimum salaries that were part of the NACL like 3 years ago, and then what's going on right now where there's zero restrictions on anything as long as you're a registered LLC. And I think that is the big problem I think that we have with how Riot has been handling the situation.
Like it just seems to me like Riot's official stance is basically Pulse can do anything with their contracted players as long as they're following through with what they promised. But that it reads to me like they could. What Pulse does with their players is their business, which I do think is partially true. And I understand that there are barriers for Riot getting involved there. But yeah, it's just like it leads to situations where teams get away with shit.
Yeah. The last thing that this article mentions is that the players actually were offered to, play without pay. And the team actually all agreed that, hey, we will actually play here for you, for Pulse, in the NACL without getting paid, even though we were promised money in some way, shape, or form. And basically, Pulse said no because they wanted, the one request that the players had was that they wanted to be able to manage their team themselves without the involvement of Pulse's upper management, that being most notably, Jubes, their owner, and then Psycho Raven, who doesn't really have an official title, but is basically the number two.
No, he does.
Like
he's their director of
he's
their director of operations officially.
director of
So,
operations for Polestar.
Important
And
important to note. I'm just going to name everybody that's involved here because I think we should. So Jubes is the owner of Pulse. Psycho Raven is the director of operations, and I don't know the title, but Censored Mercy is the third person on staff, and that is the entire Pulse organization, as we will be referring to it as. It is those three people. I just think that's important context.
yeah, and I think it's kind of crazy that after you're willing
Yes.
to, after these players are willing to play for free like you asked them to, because they had this one little request, which is basically to be able to manage their team themselves, schedule their own scrims, have their own coach, Ido, who was also, by the way, hired by Pulse originally.
Right.
That was immediately rejected. And then also the article says that Ido was then terminated, and then they were threatened, and then Pulse threatened to, quote, boom the remainder of the team,
So-
which has resulted in them LFT. Right now, as you see in this post from Zav.
Yeah, I pulled up the Zav post. This is where it's going to really get into the weeds, because also this is starting to get into a little he said, she said, and I am very inclined to side with the players on this. I will just caveat this next bit of the discussion with, I'm sure at some point along the way, a player probably could have handled something better. You know what I mean? But the onus of professionalism should absolutely be on the org. So that's really important to understand, because basically, as Grape said, they offer to play for free because they still get the chance to play in the NACL, but they're just asking for more autonomy, which I think is completely reasonable if the organization is basically not doing anything to support them financially, right? And to me, this seems like a good faith olive branch. But what happens is the players had, at least according to, I believe, Zav, reached out to the LCSPA over the payment situation, as anyone should do when they suddenly find that their income is gone, right? And the LCSPA gets involved, and as retaliation for getting the LCSPA involved, Psycho Raven and the Pulsar management fire Ido from Pulsar because they believed he was orchestrating this. And again, some of this I feel like it's probably conjecture and the details might be muddy, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But the details might be muddy, but that's what happened. And basically that's the straw that broke the camel's back, is the organization doubled down and said our way or the highway. And that is when Zav and the rest of the players and Coach Ido left the team and are now LFT, and that kind of leads us to where we are now.
I think a situation where having the PA get involved is a thing that
Very
causes something
responsible
to happen.
thing to do.
Yeah, well, first of all, yeah, you should the PA should be involved in a situation
Yes.
like this, because that is what the PA is for.
Because it also doesn't mean the org's in trouble, right? It just means hey, we're getting a third party involved so we can figure this out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then to turn that into you did what, you contacted a third party, well, we're gonna fire all of you, is incredibly unprofessional, and I do not understand how that is not going to be met with more of a bigger response here from the PA and from also all the players. And there was a good response, or a big response, I should say, from some of the players, specifically actually some of the players on Pulse. We had Toasty, who I think with the help of some of the ex-Cincinnati Fear, Citadel, the content guys, put together just a little bit of a compilation of all the things that they had problems with from Pulse. This goes beyond just this specific split. It also includes instances from 2024, when this organization first became a part of the space. Most notably, the fact that they cut both Cozy, Enthralled, and AB very close to the OQ deadline of OQ number 2, leaving them really not in a great place to find a spot. And also the fact that there's just a lot of really weird things about specifically dropping players last second, and also just the way that these finances and the partnerships ended up working out.
Yeah, so TLDW of this Toasty video is the players burned the bridge after Pulse retaliated against them, which I know people have been critical of this move, and I think that it is valid to hold criticism towards this, but guys, it's tier 2 League of Legends. Nothing is going to happen if you don't raise hell about it. And so I respect this move from Toasty. And basically, as Grape said, it's just this compilation of screenshots of roster mismanagements from the management. The Morningstar White situation, by the way, Psycho Raven, the guy that fucking got Morningstar White DQ'd and was really proud of it. If I can enlarge this, like, it's just weird. The contracts being weird and very verbal, and then Psycho just in general seeming to be someone with a lot of ego and someone that needs to control the roster very closely instead of just like realizing he's not the main character, man. And this is where this all blew up. Is this tweet from Toasty Alex right here. There's also to add,
and it seemed like the conversation between Psycho, Pulse, and the players continued after this initially came out.
Because let's just get all the context out
from
here.
Toasty,
yeah.
Where Psycho is still reaching out to players. This is a message that he sent to Kryra, just basically like asking him, begging him to come back.
On Tuesday. Yeah. This is from Tuesday.
You're sure you really don't want to play? You're really gonna play with those guys? We like posted videos of you stuff. No, it's not true, just to slander us. We got you a monitor, which I think is just like such a funny thing to say when you're promised probably a lot more than that. Kryra, for a player like Kryra, this is his second stint being on Pulse. Remember, he was part of that squad in the spring split during their OQ run as well. And so obviously there's some previous relationship there, but he's now kind of siding with the rest of his team, obviously, because he was also screwed over in the same way that they were.
Yeah. Which again, like, credit to Kryra for sticking together. I will say I really admire that seemingly all 5 players, Ido and Zav, have been very united on this front. I appreciate that they have each other's backs. I tweeted this, that the NACL is nothing without its talent, and the talent should work together. That is actually what I said after the Morningstar White situation, is that people in tier 2 and tier 3, we need to support each other and build each other up, because like at the end of the day, there's just not much regulating things. And I am proud of these players for understanding that. And clearly Psycho Raven does not. Last bit of context to just get out there, and then Grapes and I will probably just have a discussion about this the rest of the way. Because there's a lot to unpack, is that it also came out on Tuesday that a team got offered Pulstar 5 times as much as what they bought the spot for, so that they could just walk away with a profit. And now it's worth noting that Riot officially is not allowing Pulse to sell the spot, but that's kind of a whole separate problem, because we didn't even get there because Pulse. So this person contacted 2 people. First, they went to Psycho, and Psycho they demanded 100 times. I don't know if this is exaggeration. This is just what I was told. 100 times what the spot was worth, which obviously was ridiculous. So then this org owner went to Jubes, and Jubes entertained the offer until this org owner said they would hire the original Pulstar roster that the Pulse management fucking put together, by the way, that they would originally hire this original roster and play in the NACL with them, in which Jubes refused to engage in good faith conversation anymore and blocked this org owner.
Which doesn't
to me,
make any sense, because they let them go from their contracts and said they are free to explore any option.
Right.
Well, this would be one of their other options.
So that is insanity to me. And that basically catches us up to speed with where we are now. So this is a situation in which basically, to me, Grapes, I'm going to sum up my thoughts and then maybe we can break it down. Whereas I think there are 2 wrongs. The first one being the dubious financials. Like, at the most generous interpretation, Pulstar, like, just was not good at finances. And whoops, the rug came out. Hey, we can't pay anybody anymore. That is like the most generous possible interpretation. And that was the first wrong, was that now the players don't get paid. But from what it seems like to me, the players were willing to, after getting a third party involved and like saying, hey, let's figure this out through official channels instead of doing like weird, like back scratching type shit, right? Because, apparently, Psycho said that they should have gone to Jules first about this issue. Like, I don't know, man. I think you're supposed to get a third party involved when you all of a sudden don't have income, because that's what happens in real life.
Like, regardless if it was like completely right or completely wrong, it should not have resulted in that level of escalation.
Right. Exactly. Because then the escalation is that Pulsar is now basically trying to blackball all 5 of these players, their coach, and their manager, which is, to me, a huge issue. And it has resulted in these guys are all now teamless and will probably not be playing in the NACL and or anywhere until the next split. And then Pulse is still here. You know, Pulse is still here. They're going to try to put together a free roster of players that I'm hoping are not good. I'm hoping good players don't go here, because I will say, guys, if you're a prospective player out there, I know they've been reaching out to some of you. It's not just about like solidarity with your fellow players or whatever. No org is better than a dysfunctional org. You can torpedo your career by playing badly on a dysfunctional org for your first split in the NACL. Don't do it. It's not worth it for you. So that's what I'll say there. And so that's the two wrongs. That's kind of where all this shit happened. Obviously, Pulse's mismanagement goes beyond this split, as we saw from the Toasty video, but this has been the culmination of all of that. And I know I just ranted for a while, but I felt like it was good to kind of bring everything together like that.
Yeah, it's one thing to have the financial issues and back out. Like, sure, you mismanaged the situation. You thought that there'd be more sponsors or more money coming in than there was, and you initially put out what I would say is like a fairly sentimental tweet, but saying like, we're sorry to the players, we're going to let them explore their options and like not hold them here when of course we can't give them what we originally promised. Like, I think that is why last week when we came out, we were like, we don't know too much about the situation, but hopefully it just kind of works out for everybody. Obviously it's disappointing and sad, especially for an organization that we were generally like had a slightly like I would say like a general positive tilt on in terms of Pulse in 2024 for the most part. They were I know we had like the little shady situations here and there, but they were making content. They had players that we liked. They were
outwardly trying. They were outwardly trying, and I'll give them that.
Which is more than we can say about
I've always
teams.
been a little sus on them for exactly what we're seeing coming to light now, not just the drama, but also like the financials and stuff. But they were trying outwardly, and I'll give them that.
It's not just the financial situation here, because we've seen that happen every year, including 3 times this year, right? Like that's just kind of what goes with the territory here. What I think is like really angering to me and something that is really disappointing, especially to people who, or to like an organization, again, that I thought at least would have a little bit, an ounce of integrity, is the insane ego that it takes to not only like want to keep the spot after somebody offered to potentially like give you a profit off of it, and also like the fact that they are kind of blackballing these players. They are treating them bad. They are like wanting to make sure that they don't find success anymore because of what was done to them somehow, when in reality it's the people that are in charge and people who have the power and have this spot that are the ones who did bad things to these players. And so I think that is what really is like has turned the page for me.
It's
like
crazy.
I was originally like, it's a shitty situation overall. These guys like aren't very good at their jobs, but like hopefully it's all good. To like, wow, these guys are actively now trying to like ruin like these players' careers, this space, and kind of just the NACL take everything down with them in a way. Now, luckily for Pulse, luckily for these players and their manager and their coach, the first split of the NACL, we talked about this last episode, doesn't actually matter too much in terms of qualifying directly into the tournament. And I feel like actually
can we put a pin in that? Because I want to get to like where the players go next in a second. Because I think that's a slightly separate conversation. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I want to just interject with. So you said a lot of the stuff about Pulse and the ego, and I want to make one thing very clear. So Psycho Raven's been taking a lot of the heat from this, and very deserved. Like deserved. But the other people in the Pulsar organization are at the most generous interpretation up until all of this went public. At the most generous interpretation, negligent. As in, they were just giving Psycho Raven all the keys and they weren't paying attention to what was going on and plug my head in the sand and it doesn't matter. That's the most generous possible interpretation up until this point. And now that all of this has gone public and nothing has been done or action's been taken or they've clearly made no efforts to remedy the situation, they are complicit. So I want to make that very clear. And
anybody that's giving Jubes or Censored or anybody else there like a pass because they're not the ones directly involved. Like they are directly involved because they're the ones like approving of these decisions and also allowing for a person like Psycho to like continue to make these decisions while being in charge.
Exactly. Because now, like, by the way, Psycho's like appointed himself head coach of the Pulsar team for whatever's going to come in, which is like just fucking insane. But So that's point one, and then the last point I want to make on time on like kind of I guess dunking on Pulse is Gordo had a great take that I think he'd be fine if I share, which is I don't get what Polestar is even doing now, other than like being toddlers. Because what's their goal at this point? If their goal is to make a profit, then they should have entertained and gone to Riot with this deal to buy the spot, or at least like sell their company, maybe. You know what I mean? Instead of blocking that. So that clearly their goal is not to make a profit. If their goal is to promote talent and still promote the North American League of Legends space, they should have gotten their fucking roster back, because this is a great team. This team could have won NACL, as we've had a conversation about on this show. And then if those aren't their goals, I just don't really understand like what we're doing here anymore. And so that's the question. If Pulse management is watching this video, I just ask that to you. What are we doing? And I want that to be a really hard reflection, because that's kind of where I'm at. Grapes, I saw you have a point. So that's all I have to say as far as like the Pulse situation itself. And then I want to talk about the players, but I want you to get your point. So
it just makes no sense that this is like the direction. This is completely illogical in terms of strategy in any which way. The other angle is, you know, your reputation as an organization, right? That you maybe didn't necessarily touch on as much. Not necessarily success, but your reputation of being like a good org and also being good people. And you were given constant, countless outs to like do the right thing. You could have let the players play on your team for free. You could have also like tried to step away if you could, try to sell the spot once you realized you didn't have the money, or do anything right at all over the last like 6 months or however this was. And it just seems like that every single way where they could have potentially tried to save their reputation, they went the opposite way, and now we are here, which is very unfortunate, especially here for the players. Now, as I was mentioning earlier,
yes,
the
Let's
split
talk
one
about
of
the players.
NACL
Let's end it on a
doesn't
good note.
necessarily matter too much in terms of direct promotion into the LTA. Like, if you want to take DSG spot, you want to make it into the LTA, there not much going here in split one. Split two is where the placement and things like that matter. But obviously the argument against it is like, okay, if you're playing in the NACL for this first split, you get reps and you also get, you know, stage time and things like that. I think now with the added publicity to this situation, it would be a very good idea for an organization to pick up this team. Maybe not for like the same amount of money. I don't know what the salaries were like, but maybe at least something that everybody on all parties can agree to, and not only play in this open qualifier, but also just create a lot of content about the players, about them, have them stream some scrims against NACL teams, have them just prepare for when they eventually would go into the OQ and play their way through and make it in, that they would have had a lot of reps, had a lot of experience, and also gotten even maybe more publicity than what they would have gotten on Pulse. So I feel like right now, that is the best possible solution. If there's an organization out there, whether you're currently in the OQ or looking to maybe get into League of Legends in some capacity, this is like a slam dunk for you on so many different levels.
I mean, these are top players and personalities in our region. I 100% agree. There's also a lot of other things being entertained right now. Like if Near Airport doesn't want to play in the NACL, could they pick up the Pulse roster as subs and start them week 2 of the NACL? Like, it doesn't look like that's going to be happening, but based on conversations I've seen, but it is an angle. Or, you know, I get that. I completely understand Riot has legal barriers and wants to cover their own ass on all of these things. Like, I've been in those positions with other things outside of esports too. Like, I get it. I just would really like to see them get involved in some way, as opposed to just pretending it's not happening. We have seen literally no public comment from Riot or anything, and I just would like something. Like, if they can't force Pulse to sell their spot because of legal reasons, like, is there anything they could do? I just would implore that line of thinking at the very least. And if there's not, there's not. And at the end of the day, I get it. But, and then the other thing is, like, I mean, we already hit on this, but if the Pulse management, I mean, at this point, I think it's too late for them to right their wrong in terms of, like, I don't think the players the bridge is burned. But, I mean, we saw Supernova ownership change hands at the end of, or like beginning of 24 or something like that. Like, that situation could maybe happen for Pulse. But I mean, clearly people are not willing to act in good faith right now. But Grapes, I know we have.
I don't know.
Stuff
I want
to
to focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to focus more on the players,
Right.
Because I just feel like from the organizational
exactly.
standpoint, like
Again,
Riot, the way Riot is treating things right now, like the organization is just gonna be what it is,
Yes.
and there's not really much that we can do about it. I feel like right now the players have like a very specific decision and a direction that they can choose to go, and that is kind of what I was suggesting for them.
Right, I was just listing the other alternatives to like maybe get them to play in NACL for this split. But you are right. I think the most likely outcome is that they run OQs, and we hope for the best. I really do hope the players know that we're rooting for you. And it's a shit situation. I don't know, but I wish there was something we can do. If there is, our DMs are open.
Yeah, absolutely. I know this was a bit of a deviation. We are going to be back with our normal episode tomorrow to focus on the good things that are happening in the space, which is the last week of the Open Qualifier, 10 teams for that one slot. But we just wanted to get this out right now so you can hear our thoughts and also just have all the information in one kind of collectively defined place. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all tomorrow.